Good evening. Hello, folks. Welcome to my 8th live stream this year. I'm excited to be sharing my travel adventures with you. Thank you for joining me, and will apologize for the lighting. I've been working on that all and the lighting changed completely, so hopefully I'll figure out a way to take care of that next time. So while we're waiting for folks to join in, let me know in the chat box where you are and why you're joining us. Are you thinking of going to Portugal? And where you are in the world. I am currently in Mexico. Long story, which I won't go into right now. I'm in Mexico in a town, Guanajuato, which is north of Mexico City, and kind of close to Leon, and it's a really beautiful city. Right now I'm looking out the window at a gorgeous view of all the city lights. I wish I could take a reasonable picture and send it to you because it is really beautiful both day and night. This is a view of my bedroom and all the wonderful windows I have here. I'm very thrilled to be here. Also, the way that I have to get up here, anytime I'm walking, go to town and I come back, I have a lot of steps, about 3 times this many steps to get up to where I live. So by the time I leave, I will quads developed because of all the stairs, but that's how we get this beautiful view up here on the hillside overlooking the city. Hi, Deborah. Glad that you're joining us again tonight. I'm just going to make you have more wanderlust than you and I already have. And I know that you're looking forward to looking at possibly going to the Douro Valley. So let's start just talking about where the Douro Valley is in Portugal. So here's the Iberian Peninsula, and Portugal, of course, is on the west side of Spain, and if you go in the northern part of Portugal, on the coast is the town of Porto, and the Douro River, which originates in Spain, flows through Portugal and out into the Atlantic at the port of Porto. But if you go upriver about 50 or 60 miles, you will get to the Douro Valley. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. The Douro Valley, of course, is a place where there's lots and lots of vineyards and lots of olive groves, as well as other agriculture. So maybe a little bit about how I ended up here in the Douro Valley. I was just finishing up the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And I wanted a place to go to that I could just spend about 3 weeks. I wanted a small rural town that I could go to and spend like 3 or 4 weeks kind of post-processing all the things and my experiences that I had had on the Camino de Santiago. So I had been told also by people that I met on the Camino who were from Portugal that I just definitely had to come to their country. And this happens to me no matter where I go in the world. You must come to our country. So I didn't go there for the wine because I'm not that much of a wine aficionado. I will drink wine, but I don't know that much about it. And to be honest, I was really just looking for a cheap place to stay in a rural area for a while after the Camino. So I just started looking for hostels in small towns in Portugal. And then I decided on one in the little town of Alijo. Alijo is in the heart of the Douro Valley, and uphill from the Douro River about, it's probably about 1,600 feet, 500 meters or so above the river. And anywhere you walking in the Douro Valley, if you go to the river, you're going downhill, and if you go away from the river, you're going uphill. It's just a fact of life. So I ended up with in a 4-bedroom dorm that is normally shared, but because I was there in November and early December off season, I had the whole four bedroom to myself, bathroom to myself, and there was a great self-catering kitchen there and a dining room, and breakfast was included, and it was only 11 euros a night. So it was really a wonderful deal, and it was right exactly what I was looking for. And I can't say that I wasn't a little bit spoiled being there during that time. I was there for 3 weeks, from mid-November until about December the 9th or something like that. And then the following spring, I came back to meet my daughter Rebecca, and I'll talk about that again in a few minutes. So how do you get to Alijó? How do you get to the Douro River? Well, once you get out to the Douro Valley, once you get to Porto, it's pretty easy. If you're driving, it's easy. It's an easy drive. It's about 80 miles up the Douro River, and you can go by bus. The first time I went there, I went by bus. But after that, I discovered the train, which in part of the train journey from Porto to Pinhao, which is the small town river port town that I go to get to Alijo. It is a beautiful train journey. There's just wonderful, wonderful views of the river part of the way, and much of the time, there were so many times on that train I just wanted to say, can I just get off here and walk for a while, because of the views and the countryside were so beautiful. The train will let you off in this little port town of Pinhao. Pinhao is kind of a tourist attraction as well as a place where a long time ago and historically, a lot of the wine was transported on the river in little boats, and so this was another place where they would load the boats traditionally. But Pinhao is now pretty much a tourist town, and so there are lots of hotels, and there's guest houses all throughout the region. A lot of the estates have guest houses, so there's lots of places to stay. And also in the small towns, there's nice little hotels and guest houses. So when you get to Pinhao, you can go up to Alijo then by car. You can take a taxi, it's about 30 minutes. Or you can take the bus. It's probably about 45 minutes to take the bus up to Alijo, where I stayed. And these are some of the views you're going to get. And of course, this is a view in the fall, so everything is a little bit brown and tan and orange, some beautiful colors in the fall. So let's get to the good stuff. I'm going to talk about the food quite a bit. You're going to be hungry by the time we finish if you haven't had supper. And there's also the wine, which I will talk about, but I can't give a lot of expertise about the wine in the area, of course. And then there's the wonderful walks and places to visit and things to see while you're in this valley. So as usual, I'm going to skip down to the food. I'm going to talk about, there's a market in Alijo every week, and it's a very small market, but it is just chock full of some wonderful food. My daughter Rebecca was with me in the fall, and she was really having a hard time trying to decide what we could purchase that we would be able to consume in a few days from this market. But we did collect some olives and some sausages and some fruit and such, and some bread, of course, to carry on our walks. So we would always have something to snack on or have for lunch. Now, when I travel, I have a little bit of a problem. It's very challenging for me to recommend very many places to eat, because once I discover a good place to eat, I just keep going back. And that's a failing of mine. Once I find a good place, I just don't hardly give any of the others much of a chance. And I think I like this because as I return again and again to a restaurant or a cafe, people there get to know me, and it's really wonderful to walk in and they smile as they recognize you, and you get wonderful service and sometimes some really special treats. And this was the case with Restaurante Pelourinho, which was in the heart of Alijo. It was recommended to me early on by Laura, who works in the tourist office there in Alijo. And I got to be friends with Laura, and I'll talk more about her later. It's a wonderful place with a cafe downstairs and a little bit of a more formal restaurant upstairs. And the first time that I went there, I walked into the cafe, and I thought that's all there was just this cafe downstairs. And the owner didn't speak English, but he ran upstairs and he got his son, Carlos, to come down and guide me through the menu. After that, they recommended that I go upstairs because they feel like, I don't know why. I like the cafe just fine, but they liked me to come up to the restaurant. But after that, it was really hard for me to eat very many other places in Alijó outside of just going to some small cafes for a snack, etc. The mother of this family that runs this restaurant is the chef, and I still to this day follow her on Facebook, and I just drool over her photos of her daily specials and her beautiful dessert. She's just an artist with everything regarding food. My daughter also follows her now, and we've just kind of grown when we see some of the pictures that she posts. We're ready to go back right now. I discovered my favorite food in this region quite by accident. I had just visited the winery in nearby Fabios, which is a town close by. I'll talk more about that later. Winery for a recommendation for lunch, and they steered me down the road very close to a cafe, to Cafe Brights. And it's really a very local cafe bar, and it was packed with, during the midday meal, with locals. There were no tourists, but they found a table for me. Now this is a great way of course, anytime you're visiting any place, it is a great way to find the best places to eat, is ask locals where they eat. And the interesting thing I will talk a little bit about, if you're in Spain or Portugal, and many countries as well, they have many, for the midday meal, often they will have restaurants called the menu. And the menu is usually a first course, a second course, and a dessert and something to drink, which can include wine. It's very common to drink wine at almost every meal in these countries. So in this little cafe, because it was so small, they only were serving two main dishes. So it was a fish dish, and then the other one was some kind of a stew that I didn't recognize. And the waiter, they didn't have a menu to look at, and so the waiter brought my wine and my soup to the table, and then he had the two dishes on a platter, on a tray, and he pointed to them and asked which one I wanted. And I decided against the fish, and I decided the other one, it looked kind of interesting. And this is what I ended up with. I managed to get my PowerPoint transferred over here. Okay, this is what I ended up with. It's kind of a pork stew, and it is probably one of the signature dishes of Portugal. It is called Carne de Porto de Alijó, and it is a pork that's simmered in wine until it just melts in your mouth, and then it's served, and then clams are added, and those as well as some spices. And this was the segundo, or the second course. I'd already eaten my soup, and this was the second course. And when they serve in Spain and Portugal, often they serve meals to the dish, to the family style. Even if you're dining by yourself, you'll in your own plate that you can serve yourself from. So it's like almost all you can eat affair. I managed to stuff myself silly this day, and I didn't have any room for the dessert at the end of the meal. And I just said, that's enough. I've had enough to eat. And I went to the counter, and I paid an entire €6 for this meal. That's about $7.50 US. But then I had to walk the 2 miles back to Alijó, because I had walked over to Fabios on that full stomach. Then when I left, just before I left Alijo in the fall, Chef Maria at Pelourinho had learned how much I enjoyed this dish. She told me that she just might be preparing that Carne de Porto de Alijo on my last night there. And everyone prepares this dish a little differently. Some cooks serve it with rice or with bread, but in this case, another huge plate was brought to my table for me to serve myself. Maria, instead of cooking the potatoes in the dish, she puts roasted potatoes on top, and her special touch was to add little tiny chunks of pickled cauliflower, and it created the perfect bits of taste highlights to this dish. And as the meal progressed, Maria came out from the kitchen to see what I thought. And since I don't speak Portuguese, I gestured to her that it was making me cry. I rolled tears down my eyes, and she laughed and was glad that I was enjoying it so much. And when I finished, all that was left on my plate was a pile of shells and some olive pits. But in this case, I did find room for dessert, which again was another traditional dessert. It's a Portuguese orange roll, and it's made with oranges, but I don't know exactly how it's made. But it was a perfect ending to a really comforting meal in this really lovely restaurant. There are so many dishes to try in Portugal. I could spend the whole time here just talking about them and the wonderful food and the hospitality surrounding food. But after all of that talk of food, I'm going to say that maybe it's time for a little bit of exercise. I spent a lot of time in Alijó in the Douro Valley walking, and I kind of discovered a few of the hikes that I really liked a lot. Probably one of my favorites and a very easy walk is to go from Alijó, which is up here in this upper right side of the map, and it's only about 3 kilometers down to the little village of Favaios. Fabios has a wonderful assortment of things to eat and see and do. And the nice thing about this walk, one of the nice things, is that you walk through the vineyards the entire way. It's kind of a back road way to go. And when you come up onto the village of Fabios, you get these beautiful views of the village. And as you get very close to the village, you come to this overlook that has an arbor. When I was there in the fall, the leaves of the grapes on the arbor were absolutely stunning, red, orange, yellow, gorgeous. And then when I returned with Rebecca in the spring, the same arbor had completely turned green. And it is an area right at the top of the hill before you descend into Fabios that has some, as usual, wonderful views. I will recommend that anybody doing this walk that they start very early, pretty early in the morning, so that you can get to Fabios fairly early, because it is a favorite place for bus tours to come. There's a lot of river cruises that come up the Douro River, and they stop in Pinhao and put their people on buses and take them around to visit some of the estates and the sites, and Fabios is one of the places they come. And so it can get a little bit crowded, especially during the high season. I was there during low season, and even then there was some bus tours that came through. And that's another good reason to visit this area during the slow season. So another good reason to arrive in Fabios early in the morning is because you can get there when the bakeries are still open, because Fabios is really well known for its three-corner bread. And the bakeries there don't really have a sign on them that they're bakeries. They don't sell anything else except for this bread, and usually they're just attached to a home. And not all the bakeries are open every day. So what you have to do is go down the street, follow your nose, smelling for the beautiful bread, smell of bread coming out of the doors, kind of poke your head in some of the open doors and see if you see an oven or if you see people working on the bread there. And the ladies that work there were the one we chose were very friendly. They let us come in and take pictures and watch them prepare the bread. And before long, you are walking down the street, stuffing your face full of this delicious bread. And then, very appropriately, you walk down the street, and Fabios is a very small town, so you're not going to walk very far to get anywhere in Fabios. You walk down the street, it's to the Bread and Wine Museum, and there's lots of wonderful, interesting displays about these two very important exports in the area, wheat and wine. There's a long history of these agricultural products, and I thought it was a really interesting museum, and all the displays are in Portuguese and in English, so it's easy for those of us that are English speakers to go and learn some new things about this area. And then at the end after you finish looking at all the displays, you go out onto their terrace and they serve you a tasting of the local muscatel, which is another type of fortified wine, somewhat like port. It's sweet, it's a dessert wine, and you get to sit and sip your muscatel overlooking those beautiful vineyards around Fabios. So then a few more blocks further down the street, you will come to the Favaios Cooperative Winery, where there's several varieties of wine and muscatel are made. When I was there in the fall, I wasn't able to get on a tour because they were booked with the tour buses, but the day that Rebecca and I returned, we were a little bit earlier in the day, and they told us that if we came back in an hour, they would be done with the tour that they were conducting and that we could have a tour at that time. So that was a great opportunity for me to say to Rebecca, oh, I know this great place we just have to eat, Cafe Brights, and we walked in a little bit earlier that day and enjoyed another wonderful meal there. You will see here Rebecca eating, and to her left is a large platter that we served ourselves from. I can't remember what we ate there. Rebecca, if you're out there, tell us. You can text what we ate that day if you remember. You've got a better memory than I do. So then we returned back to the winery, and it turned out that we were the only people on the tour, and we got a great personalized tour. Rebecca was able to ask all of her questions about the wine and how it's made, and then at the end she got a great tasting of their table wine. They make several varieties of table wine there, and quite a few different kinds of muscatel as well. Oh, Rebecca says she remembers that meal was something with tripe. Of course, Rebecca loves tripe. So another great walk that I took twice was from the village of Castedo. Now, Alijo is up here in the top part of this map, and then there's a little village here called Castedo, which is several miles south. And then I decided to walk along these back roads that have very, very little traffic. There's a little bit of agricultural traffic, and about once every couple hours a bus comes through, but there's no traffic along these roads, all the way down to Pinhao, which is on the river. The first time I spent a lot of time thinking about this hike and exactly how I was going to do it, because I knew that I couldn't walk. It was probably close to 15 miles to walk from Alijo all the way to Pinhao. And I had to get to Pinhao in time to catch the bus in the evening to get back up to Alijo, or I would have had to take a taxi, which was quite more expensive. So I decided I would take the bus partway to Castedo and then get off and then walk the rest of the way. And that would give me plenty of time, because I spend a lot of time stopping, taking pictures, just gawking at the beautiful scenery, etc. So I started out really early in the morning. This was late November, and the mornings were pretty cold then. I had to bundle up. But then as it got into the day, once the sun came out, it warmed up quite a bit and was quite comfortable. So I knew that it would be a nice day, and the sun was shining when I left the hostel. And but when I got to Castedo and the bus just dumped me out there, it was pea soup fog. The whole valley was just completely covered in fog. And I was really bummed out. I was like, this, this is not going to be that hike that I had planned. I was really disappointed. And I was just kind of going, well, maybe I should try another day, but I wasn't going to be there that many more days. And I thought, I just really wanted to do the hike. I was, you know how you get very exasperated when you're traveling. So I just kind of walked a little ways, and I thought I kind of decided, well, do I wait and walk back up to Alijó, wait for the bus? What do I do? But one thing I realized, at some point it kind of came to me that I've learned on my travels that things seem to turn out all right. And it's important to embrace whatever your surroundings were. And this was a little hard to embrace because it was cold and I couldn't see a darn thing. I could barely see, when I got off the bus, I could barely see the church across the street. But what happened was, I just set off. I said, well, I can always go back if it, you know, but after, it wasn't long before I discovered that this world around me was really enchanted. The church became very mystical. There were rows of these colorful grape leaves that had not been trimmed yet from the vines that disappeared into the distance, into the fog. The dew was hanging really heavy on these forgotten grapes, and it was just almost, you know, something that I wouldn't have seen had the sun been shining, because the dew would have been dried by then. And then the grapevines that had been trimmed already for the fall, they trim them back every year. To me, I just kept thinking they looked like these wizened ancient wizards, and that just hobbled away off into the distance. For some reason, that just kept coming to my mind. But over the next few hours, the sun really won its battle with the clouds, and slowly the distant terraces emerged, and I did get some wonderful views about the time that I hit, probably about close to the halfway mark on my hike. By the time I reached a little village called Casal de Loivos, the sun was out, and I encountered an unexpected trip. Despite the fact that I had researched this to death, what this hike was going to be like, I had no idea that I was going to encounter first a sign that pointed down the road that there was an olive oil press museum here in this tiny village. And I saw the sign and I just went, they won't be open, this is off season. But sure enough, it was. It was part of the Direita estate, which is a very large winery and wine estate in the Douro Valley. And when I walked in, there was a small tour group there immersed in a tasting. So I just went on through and came up to the terrace and just was standing there looking at the Douro River and at Pinhao far below. And Susanna, who was the museum host, walked out and she offered me a tasting, and she said, do you want it inside or outside? And of course I chose the terrace, and she proceeded to treat me to the local offerings. This museum and this tasting room is run, like I said, by the Direita estate, where they grow grapes, olives, almonds, and they also have honey from their bees. And it wasn't long before I was sitting before this tapestry of local foods, 3 table wines, a white, a rosé, and a red, olive oil, almonds, honey, and they even have create a grape juice from their grapes at this winery as well. And so when I was standing on the terrace enjoying my wine, the sun was shining, I could see Pinhao below me. I just felt like I had gone to heaven, or I was like in some romantic movie in this area. I just thought it was just a really interesting experience that I was having, and unexpected. As I finished my tasting, Susanna told me that a small group had arrived and asked if I would like to join their tour of the museum. So I got a nice explanation of how traditional olive oil is made. it would be wonderful to go there probably maybe in September, maybe October. I don't know, Deborah, you were in Spain, I think, or in Portugal for one of the olive harvests. And I think it might have been in October, I can't remember. But you could see actually all of this going on at that time, although you will have to put up with a lot of crowds during the harvest. So there's kind of a trade-off there. So I couldn't help myself. I had to purchase a half a liter of olive oil and a bottle of white wine. I tend to, especially when I'm on hikes, I don't purchase so much because I have to carry it, but I couldn't resist in this case. And there, for each of these purchases, there's kind of a little bit of a follow-up story. When I arrived at the airport in Porto to leave Portugal, I was asked at the ticket counter if I had any olive oil in my checked bag. Oh no, I was just sure they were going to take my olive oil away from me. And they know that people bring olive oil home from Portugal. And I just had to say yes. And the agent asked me if it was over a liter. So no, it wasn't. It was just that, it was actually less than a half a liter at that point because I'd already had some of it. So I was lucky I got to continue to carry my olive oil with me. And this olive oil was just stupendous. It's a very low acid olive oil that they make, low acidity, and so it has a really wonderful olive flavor that I've never had with any other olive oil. And then the bottle of wine has another story. It's almost magical. By the time that I left Alijó, I had not yet opened it, and I always need someone to share a bottle of wine with because I can't drink a whole bottle of wine or even half a bottle of wine. And I was having a hard time finding someone at the hospital to share it with. So I decided that I would just leave it with my friend Laura, who works at the tourism office, because she'd been so helpful and so friendly while I was there. So I went by and I offered it to her, and she said, well, I will take it, but I'm going to save it, she said, until you return to Alijó, and then you come to my house for dinner, and we'll open the bottle of wine. And I said, no, go ahead and enjoy it with your family. I'm not going to be back. But interestingly enough, a few weeks later, Rebecca called me. I was in Ireland, I think, at the time or something like that. Rebecca called me and she said, if I came to Portugal in May, would you meet me? And so we found ourselves at Laura's and her husband Quim's table, and we all enjoyed that bottle of wine. And Laura made a fantastic meal for us, and look what it was. Carne de Porto de Alijó. She remembered that it was my favorite dish when I was there. Another little thing that happened in May was that I took Rebecca back so she could see the olive oil press museum in the spring, and when we walked in, Susanna, the host, was there, and she recognized me. I found that really interesting. And she remembered that I had written a blog post about visiting there in the fall, and she insisted on calling the manager to come up, and he just really was glad to meet us, and he treated us like royalty, and he even gave us a bottle of wine, and was really thrilled that we had returned to visit again. So that was a nice little ending to that visit, that initial unexpected visit to the De Joram Estates Olive Press Museum. So back to the hike down to Pinhao. I finished the hike and continued on down into the valley to the river and through another village before I got there. There's lots of villages in the area, and I had a small meal of ham and cheese, local hams, cheese, and a salad and some wine before boarding the bus back to Alijó. By that time, it was dark, and on the return, I just savored a really different view of the valley with the twinkling lights coming on from the villages that we passed and the estates on the hillside, and it was another magical view of that valley. And later I wrote in my journal sometimes at the end of such a day, I get this overwhelming sense of this, of like, this cannot be my life. And all the gratitude of which my heart is capable is not enough. And if any of you have read my blog post about pinch myself moments, this was a pinch myself moment. It was unbelievable that I was living this life, and I experienced those quite often during my travels. So I see Deborah said she was in the south of Spain helping to harvest the olive harvest and pressing, and it was in late November. So yeah, I think the olive harvest in Alijo was a little bit earlier than that, earlier in November, because they were finished with the harvest by the time I got there in mid-November. Let me see. So I'm going to give you a few more walking tidbits. When Rebecca came in the spring, of course, the weather was quite a bit warmer for walking, and I didn't have to bundle up quite so much. And we did those walks that I've already described to you, and another one, a couple more that were really wonderful as well. One day we sat in the sun on a hillside and ate some of the sausages and olives and cheese, and it was just another just feeling of unbelievability, just feeling this unbelievable feeling that you are really here. And we took photos. Now the flowers were blooming, the vineyards were green now instead of oranges and yellows, and there were spectacular pictures of the river below. I really love walking in the countryside, in countries that are not much, you don't find this in the United States very much. Maybe in New England possibly, you have villages that are close enough to each other that you can walk from one village to another and maybe go through 5 or 6 villages during a daily walk. And I just love being able to do this, and you have the opportunity to stop in small bars and cafes and take breaks or enjoy lunch in these small local establishments along the way. One day, Rebecca and I walked to the village of San Vin de Douro, which is a little bit north and west of Alijo. And we did we went to San Vin de Douro, and then we went down to Fabios and then back to Alijo, so we did a loop trip. But when we got to San Vin, we were ready to eat lunch, and we were having a little bit of a hard time finding a place open, and finally we found this place, and we had this meal, Bacalhau gourmet de sa, which is a casserole that you see in Portugal quite a bit. I apologize for my pronunciation of Portuguese, because if anything, I give it a Spanish pronunciation rather than more of a Portuguese, which doesn't even sound anything like Spanish. But this was a wonderful casserole. It includes potatoes, one of my favorites, and salted cod, which is one of Rebecca's favorites. And Portugal is well known for this dish. You see a lot of things that are prepared with salted cod in Portugal. And then we returned to Alijo by way of Fabios, and on the way we encountered a chicken yard, and maybe we had plenty of wine, but we found this quite funny. We sat there listening to that rooster crow over and over, because we thought it was kind of pathetic, it was kind of sad, but it was quite fun for us to encounter this interesting rooster along the way. Then we ended up back in Fabios, and we had to stop for a snack, right? Rebecca got a glass of wine, I got café con leche, and would you believe that glass of wine cost only 70 cents US. The coffee was 83 cents. So the coffee actually cost more than the wine, but they were both quite cheap. As you will see, you would find in Portugal is a very inexpensive place to visit as far as European countries go, and the food is amazing, and it's pretty easy to find a place to stay that's fairly inexpensive. Now, I am not going to talk, as I said earlier, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about wine because, of course, that is not my area of expertise, so I'm not even going to try. But, of course, the Douro Valley is very well known for its port wine and also muscatel, which is another fortified dessert wine. But the Douro Valley does produce just as much table wine as it does fortified wines. And the non-fortified wines are commonly called the Douro wines. If you are a wine lover or just interested in learning about the wines of the area, you could very easily spend a week just sampling, going from estate to estate in various wineries and sampling wines, both on foot and by automobiles. There are a few of the estates you almost need an automobile to get there or take a taxi, but the whole area is quite walkable, and you could really enjoy doing a walking tour of the estates. So, who are out there is ready to go to the Douro Valley? I'm very close to the end of the presentation, so if you have any questions, please include them in the chat, or if you have any comments. And I will say that I have really only shared my experiences of the Douro Valley. There's also a great deal more to explore there, so I encourage you to do your own research to decide what aspects of the area you would like to learn about. If you contact my friend Laura Pera, who works at the tourism office, she is wonderful. She's really good at learning what is interesting to you and then finding the right kind of places for you to go. I'm in the notes to this video. I'm including on the YouTube video, you'll see the notes. I'm including links to all the places that I mentioned in here, the museums, the wineries, the places that we ate, and as well as the hostel that I stayed in, and the information for the contact information for the tourism office in Alijó. I did contact Laura yesterday, and she says right now the tourism office is still closed for COVID, but they are slated to be opening up around Easter time. So it'll be open in plenty of time if you wanted to contact her and find out more about any visits that you might want to do. I have my hopes to be back in Alijó this next fall, so we're really crossing our fingers to make that happen. So let's see, I was going to read here what Deborah wrote. So Deborah has spent time in southern Portugal, in Lisbon, which I didn't even get to. I have a real failing about the way that I travel is I find one place and I just stay there for a while. And oftentimes I will then miss some things in the country that are really interesting just because I will spend so much time in one place. So there's the advantage to that is I get to know people, I get to know the area, and I get to really savor it. The disadvantage is that I miss out on some other opportunities. So there's pros and cons to both ways to travel. And I know, Deborah, you spent quite a bit of time in Spain when you were there in that time in November. I think it was the same year that I was in Portugal, you were in Spain as well. So, so I will say that in closing, I'm not really sure what I'm going to talk about next week. I picked today's topic because my friend Starla asked me to talk about Portugal because she and her husband are thinking about going there. And so any suggestions of other places you would like for me to talk about, you can go on my website, which is here, and see other places that I have been. If you'd like for me to talk about any of those topics or any other travel topics, I'm happy to cover. So if you have any suggestions, you can text me or email me. My contact information is on the website. I would be glad to cover anything that you are interested in. I want to thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed this broadcast, be sure to like it on YouTube and Facebook and all those things. I don't even know what all those things are, but anyway, share it with your friends. Encourage them if they're thinking about traveling and would like to travel in this slow style, that they might like to come to the next event. Now, as usual, I'm going to leave you with a short video. One evening, I was returning at twilight from eating. I was returning to my hostel, and I was walking up the hill, and I noticed these swarms of birds flying overhead. It was a murmuration of swallows. I had seen pictures of them, videos of that, but I had never seen one in real life, and I was completely mesmerized. And after a while, I noticed that groups of birds would separate from the swarm and then move down into the many trees in the main park of Alijo to roost for the night. So I had to make this measly attempt at trying to capture this wonderful wonder of nature. So I'm going to share that with you. And it's something that happens in Alijo in the fall, usually between November and about early, maybe late winter, I think, that you will see this happening. And they kind of take it for granted there, but I was completely blown away. So I'm going to share that. I'll say goodbye for now. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you next week.